Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt podcast. Our guest today is Josh Duntz. Josh is a former EOD and now an account executive at Shift, as well as the founder and CEO of his own company, Stasis. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, us too, man.
Yeah, it's going to be good. You want to give us the 5-minute backstory? What led you to join? Tell us about your time in and what led you here.
Sure. So grew up in Tampa, Florida area. I guess kind of typical after high school, went to college up in Tallahassee, the community college up there. I didn't get into Florida State. Had a couple of buddies get into Florida State. Some of us that didn't, all enrolled in the college up there, the community college. Did that for like a semester and quickly realized that college wasn't going to be right for me at that time in my life. So quickly moved back home and kind of was ready to get out of the house again as soon as possible. So never had kind of like grown up thinking the military was going to be the path that I chose to go down by any means. And I had another buddy that I went to high school with that had joined the Navy. And I was just talking to him. He's like, yeah, just go talk to a recruiter or whatever. So I ended up going and talked to a recruiter. Kind of next thing is, whatever, 5-6 months later, I'm going to boot camp with a Navy EOD contract, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, how old were you when you just got to college?
I was 18 when I left. I was 19 when I initially went to boot camp in the Navy.
Okay. So I'm assuming you're in Florida, you're in close proximity to Florida State. The distractions, I'm sure, were aplenty.
Yeah, I just was probably fairly typical 18-year-old, super irresponsible, not ready to live on my own by any means. Didn't have money to go to college or anything like that, so the Navy seemed like a really good idea at the time, and they were offering $40,000 signing bonuses if you made it through EOD school. And at 19, that was pretty intriguing to me at the moment.
Oh yeah. I feel like I thought my story was so unique joining, but as we do these podcasts, I realized that everybody has one of two stories. I got to college, realized it wasn't for me, or going into the military is a family thing. So
yeah,
that's what I did. So I'm not special, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that sign-on bonus is certainly alluring. We've talked in several episodes about how so many of the people in the military come from pretty traditional, maybe blue collar families, and so you start seeing the number signs and you're like, oh wow, what would I do with $40,000? What did you do with your sign-on bonus? I guess we have to ask.
Nothing. Smart. I have nothing to show for it. I don't know where it went. Stupid stuff, probably. I remember I bought a garage gym, which was, a good investment in my books, but a dirt bike, just toys, it's fucking.
That's awesome. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Were you, were you into sports growing up? Other than the sign-on bonus, the EOD pipeline is, I'm assuming, fairly rigorous, and at least to get in, was that something, were you competitive in that way early on, or I guess what brought you to that?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up, I played every sport there was growing up. In high school, I played basketball, and then football was the main sport in high school for me. But yeah, I was super competitive. I never really was super into running or anything like that, swimming. I grew up, surfing and just around the ocean. So I was a pretty good, I was an above average swimmer, just because half the people have never even seen an ocean before, so the diving portion of EOD school was super cake to me, which is the most difficult part for a lot of people that just because you just have to be comfortable like in the water and stressful environments and stuff. And I grew up like doing that shit, like diving just, for fun and stuff. So I was like super fortunate that, but I was always like a real weak like runner compared to a lot of the dudes that like came from, you know, a lot of dudes like swam or ran in like high school and college. The officers were always in super good shape, but you kind of just like get, do enough to survive at the moment anyway. So
what is the diving training look like? I mean, is it similar to like buds where you're doing all this like crazy being tied up type stuff, or are you scuba diving? I mean, what is that like?
yeah, both. We did a lot of our like water confidence stuff is what I think they call it, in dive prep, which is back up in Great Lakes. And like, it's what you go to right after you graduate boot camp before you go to dive school. It's supposed to like, it weeds out a lot of it, like half the class. But it's also supposed to like prepare you for dive school a little bit. But yeah, you do like the drown proofing and all that stuff up there. And then at dive school, you do, the traditional pool hits. You've probably seen like YouTube clips of stuff like that. And then a lot of it's just like learning about like all the medical stuff that goes with diving, like dive physics. It's very like curriculum and like academic based on top of just like all the physical and pool stuff that you have to do. And then EOD school is like all academic based. There's like we worked out, I think like one time a week as a class going through EOD school, and then it was kind of up to you to just, stay in shape.
Oh wow, that's not what you would expect. At least like
I
in
definitely wasn't expecting that.
yeah, like in my head, I would think I guess I'm like equating it to, like I said, like buds or where they're just like beating the shit out of you all the time.
Yeah.
But I guess it's a lot more in class stuff. So that's interesting.
Yeah, so like dive prep and dive school are kind of like the real physical courses during the EOD pipeline. And then once you get to EOD school, it's like 12-hour PowerPoints every day, and you probably have like 3 tests a week, and you have 2 chances to pass each test. And if you fail the second time, like typically, depending on how much they like you either get like one rollback where you start from the beginning, or they'll just like kick people out like after that first, we call it double tap, basically like you're pass or failing the same test twice. So it's like really rigorous, like in the classroom, studying just like all day long, and doing like a lot of practical based like tests and stuff too. So
Are those tests pretty hard, or are they? Because like when Brock and I did very similar jobs in the Navy, and I remember his school in particular was known to be more difficult than mine, but it was the same thing. Like if you failed the same test twice, and some of the tests were like really difficult.
yeah, there was definitely like that school set up by divisions basically, and like certain divisions were known to be like really hard, where everyone was like nervous to go through that, and some of them were easier. And then not only that, but it depended on what test you got, right? They were all different.
Oh, gotcha.
For the practical test, they were all different. For the written test, I believe they were all the same, but like the practicals are really the ones. And it's like EOD is kind of funny because like there's certain sets of rules and like safety precautions that you have to take, but there's not necessarily one way to solve the problem, right? So there's a lot of like ambiguity there, and it would depend on what instructor you got, like how closely they were going to grade you for certain things and stuff like that. So it was kind of a lot of guessing game out of it too. And then the other thing is it's a 10-month long school, and like I said, you're doing 3 tests a week probably. So you're looking at just volume wise, like it's hard to stay that locked on for that length of time. I think was a lot of guys had trouble, and the school kind of progressively got harder as you go because it's just getting more advanced, so
Sure.
it's just like a grind to make it through that school. I think the attrition rate when I was going through was like in the high 70s, like around 80%. So my class started like we had an all Navy class started EOD school, I think with 25 people, and we all got rolled back. Like no one made it straight through without getting rolled back. And I think like out of that 25, like 5 of us ended up actually making it through. So pretty high attrition rate.
What so I guess after school and after making it through all of that, did you I'd imagine, is EOD one of those types of, I guess, jobs or rates where you're either like in Norfolk or in San Diego? Is that like
Yeah, basically. That those are like, so we have kind of shore duty and sea duty, just like probably every other rate. Like your sea duty commands are in San Diego, Norfolk, Guam, and Spain. So one of those 4 spots is basically where you're going to end up after graduating school. And I was in Norfolk the whole time.
Yeah, that's where I currently live. So
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah, and that's where Tim and I both met. So yeah. Are you back down in Florida now?
Yeah.
Didn't feel
I'm
like
down
sticking
in,
around the great Hampton Roads area.
Oh, it's so
no, dude,
nice there.
yeah, I mean, Virginia Beach was all right. But yeah, when I got out, I was, that town is, it's like all military, you know, and I was ready to kind of start a new chapter of my life. And I felt like getting out of there was the best, probably decision so far that I've made.
Did you get the chance to deploy after you had gotten out, or did you have a 6-year contract?
So I was in for like 10 years.
Okay.
I did 3 deployments out of Moline at 6 where I was, and then I finished off my career at a shore det in Norfolk, where we kind of worked a lot with like the local bomb enforcement, and we would pick up stuff like out in town. So it was really chill spot to be like the last couple of years, because I knew I was getting out. So it allowed me to get my, I finished up like my college, got a bachelor's degree, and kind of just really set myself up for that transition, which was nice. A lot of people don't have that luxury of like being at a chill command when you're getting out. So it was really nice. I got super lucky and took advantage of it.
Yeah, I think that's something that's under talked about, is when you do, or if you are going to have like a period of a few years where it's going to be easy, like you really need to put the pedal down on getting some personal or professional development stuff, whatever, if it's a degree or certifications or whatever, you really need to take advantage of those when they're offered to you.
For sure. Yeah, I got super lucky with like just having some dudes I looked up to that got out before me, that I had like kind of role models and mentors to follow. Because I talk about this sometimes, like I think it's hilarious that you go to get out of the military, and they, you know, the person that's in charge of that is likely some admin person from your shop or whatever. And like they've been active duty their whole time, so they've never gotten out of the military, and like they're supposed to be in charge of you successfully getting out of the military. And it kind of blows my mind a little bit. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's literally, we were talking about this before we started recording, but so much of what we are trying to do with this podcast is like hopefully something that somebody could listen to, I guess, maybe before they got out, or some things to start thinking about. Because like you said, the people that are guiding you on your transition out are either trying to convince you to stay in because you're already at 10 years and you're halfway there, you're just 10 more years away from retirement, or they're people that have never done the process and actually have no input or legitimate advice about how things actually work, like using your GI Bill or any of that.
Well, it's always like your chief or your first class, and their advice is always have a plan. Okay, what should my plan be, chief? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I've been in for 24 years, but you should probably make a plan. Like, great advice. I'll come up with a couple of them. There's like really, other than what is it called, TAPS, there's really like no guidance for like what that plan should be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily there's, you know, so many like nonprofits and for-profit companies that are out there now building companies and organizations around kind of solving this problem with transition. So compared to like 5 years ago, it's completely changed with how many resources there are. I think the military could do a lot better job of like formalizing that or partnering with some of these companies to come in and kind of take over the TAPS process and take it into the 21st century.
We were talking about that at a different episode, but it's like there's seems to be so many resources out there, but they're so hard to find. Like where do you, like, unless somebody's done it and like gives you the heads up of like, oh, like go check this organization out, like nobody talks about it. They're hard to find.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
We ended up sticking around for 10 years. What was the trigger pull on just knew that you didn't want to do another 10 or
Yeah, like I was coming up to that point where it was, that is kind of like a milestone, that 10-year mark, right? Because you're halfway there. So it's like, all right, if I stay in any longer, I might as well stay in and do 20. And just like with where I was, I guess, like in my career, I wasn't really happy with like the community. And I don't know, I just didn't want to, I wasn't ready to commit my life to like another 10 years. I was ready for whatever was next. I just wasn't happy like anymore, and there was other stuff that I got like, I was into like tech, and like I saw that kind of industry like blowing up, and I was like, I'm gonna go try to do something in that.
what well, I guess, can you talk a little bit about that? What were your goals, and what about tech was appealing to you, and how did you chase that down?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I guess originally where the thing that was like that's what I wanted to do, but it was just like you see the companies that are kind of changing like the landscape of the world are all in tech, right? And we saw it was like starting to come into the military, and there's a lot of like cool tech that you get to use as an EOD tech with like robots and identification equipment for like chemical and biological um, stuff, and even with like homemade explosives, like cool kits and stuff. So even though like I was obviously that like intrigued me to do the job, so I was just kind of into it. And then yeah, like getting out. You talked about Mike before we started. So he was I don't know if I said this, but he was also a EOD officer in the Navy, and him and I actually went through EOD school together. So I've known him, for a decade now, and he got out a couple years before me and started Shift. So he was like just someone I kind of like a role model and mentor that I've had, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible when I joined the Navy to like get out and like start your own company and raise venture capital, and like, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know that was possible, and I like saw people that I admired and like people that came from kind of the same background as me. Although like he's not the same background. Like he went to the Naval Academy and then got his master's from Harvard before he joined the Navy. So we're in other leagues that far, but guys coming from the same community and just like doing really cool stuff in the private sector. And I was like, I want to go try to do some of that shit.
Yeah. Well, you hit on something there that's so vital, is knowing what your options are. Like we had this will reference another episode, but we talked with this guy, Nate, that like goes out and like buys businesses, like pre-existing businesses, or like you said, raising money to start your own company, like presenting that to somebody who's in the military, their eyes would probably be this big around. They'd be like, what?
Oh, yeah.
And that's a tremendous failure, I think, on the military's part. Not that they're not trying to set you up to get out, but there should be something that helps you become aware of those things. And
Right.
it almost takes you getting out and like really being serious about your career to like start looking for those things and getting down the rabbit hole on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of like data out there about how much more successful like veteran entrepreneurs are vice like people that just kind of went from college into the private sector. And so it's cool. Yeah, I completely agree. Like we all know the military is never going to be in like the business of transition, right? Like they're in the business of like recruiting and retaining talent, but there is just like a gap in like how available all this stuff is, that I feel like is not a hard solution or problem to solve. Like that, they could go out there and vet like all these resources and stuff like that, and just give people a better idea of here are the options out there, like you said.
Absolutely.
Will you we have been talking about Shift a little bit here, but do you want to kind of give us the pitch on what you do now with Shift, what the company does, what you do?
Yeah, Shift. So, like I said, it's a career advancement company for military members, past and present. And basically, what that means is we find like the top military talent, we train them or upskill them, and then we feature them to organizations that want to hire military veterans. So, kind of a three-step process there. We have products for active duty military personnel transitioning, and then also veterans that may already be in the private sector and are either looking to change industries or kind of just switch their job title in the space already. And there's one of the really cool programs that's being done right now is called Defense Ventures, and that's for active duty personnel. And basically that pairs them up with a venture capital firm or VC backed startup where they do, I believe it's 6 weeks, it's 6 to 8 week like immersion programs where these companies or VCs give them like a big project to complete during that sprint phase. And then the goal of bringing back like the latest and greatest technology into the military. So these are like people that aren't either, not really thinking about transitioning or early on in their career. So they're going to go do this and then go back into the military as an active duty personnel and kind of hopefully apply some cool innovation stuff that they learned at those companies. And then there's like transition programs for people that don't know what they want to do next. We have a program called Navigating Next that's 4 weeks long. And basically the idea is to, in that 4 weeks, you figure out what you want to do in the private sector. And then there's a follow-on 4-week program called Career Accelerator. That's basically an industry immersion and job function specific program. So after you figure out what you want to do, then you go into this and kind of do a deep dive into what that specific role is. And then once you graduate that, we have a software piece that all of those candidates get listed on that our hiring partners have access to as basically a simplified way to hire military talent.
And does
That's my pitch.
No, that sounds really cool. Where's the money coming from the veteran or from the company?
Yeah, the companies pay us like a subscription fee to have access to that platform that they hire people off of.
Right on. Okay. And then with the program for somebody who's in actively, do you guys partner up with the military where their command basically says, okay, you go to this for the next 8 weeks? Or is it like on their own free time?
No, yeah, it's a DoD run program. So it was launched by AFWorks a couple of years ago. If you're familiar with them, they're basically like the innovation arm / venture capitalists of the Air Force. So yeah, they run that program, but it's a DoD contract that pays for that.
That's pretty.
Should have known that the Air Force had access to all the good stuff,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, they're like crushing it as far as all the the AFWorks program is really cool.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting, and I can't even imagine that the value that provides. Like we've been talking about, there's such a large opportunity there, and just even a simple solution might work, but this sounds like it's hitting a lot of the critical points. I guess, how long have you been working with Shift? And then what do you do? And can you give us a sense for maybe company size or how many people you've worked with, or I guess the company has worked with?
Yeah, Shift has been around for like 5 or 6 years now. Right now, I think we're at like 25 or 30 employees. So it's a seed stage startup, so pretty early on in like the company's life cycle. I've been there for, I think, 4 or 5 months now. I'm on the partnership team, so I'm on the sales team. And basically, it's my job to go out and find these companies that we're partnering with. So that's what I do on a daily basis. A lot of other veterans at the company, which is super cool to see. I did a skill bridge internship with a different company when I was getting out through Shift, actually. And the company was based out in San Francisco, and it was a cool experience. But I just like wasn't in love with kind of, I guess, their mission or what they were doing. Whereas with Shift, it's like a no-brainer for me to get back into that. And I know the space really well, and like I have a good military network. So I really like what I do over there. So it's been super cool so far.
What so I guess being on the sales component, you probably come to these companies that are, you guys want to target like probably high tech companies or maybe cutting edge companies to transition veterans to it. What is the pitch that you give to them? Like how do you position veterans and why are they a good pick, I guess, for these companies?
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on the company, I guess, there's a few factors. Like some companies have worked with veterans in the past and like they've been high performers at their company. So those companies are really easy because they understand kind of those intangible soft skills that a lot of veterans can bring into organizations. Something that is true for a lot of people is like you're not going to have maybe the exact skill set or industry experience of your peers that are competing with you for the job. So that's the hardest part that we're dealing with right now, is kind of like educating these people and finding companies that understand it's not about a lot of those technical skills. Like you can teach someone how to do that. And veterans learn new stuff really fast. So those are the kind of thing, depending on who the person is, what they care about. There's different kind of like tactics, I guess you could say, as what you're kind of honing your pitch to be.
And do you, just for my own curiosity, do you guys at Shift, do you have some sort of like a lead generator? Are you generating your own leads? How does that work?
Yeah, so right now, the account executives, we do the whole sales process. So from prospecting to kind of discovery and closing. We actually or January 20th, we're launching a really cool new program that's for like SDRs, like sales development, where they're going to do all the lead gen for the AEs, and then basically the AE kind of closes the deal. There's 12 of those BDRs starting. They're all veterans, and it's like a really cool innovative program that they built at Shift that allows people to use their GI Bill for 12 months while they're going through this program. It's basically like an apprenticeship program. And then, with the goal of converting all of these people into full-time account executives at Shift, like at the end of that training program. So super cool. I'm really excited to have all those people join the team. It's going to make my job a lot nicer too. So.
Yeah, heck yeah. Having somebody generate the leads for you essentially is it makes your job very easy. And then you just come in, sweet talk them, and wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, that's the goal at least.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. And I imagine like being a veteran yourself, you're able to speak to the community's like aptitude and ability much more than somebody who probably isn't. But I think you hit on something there that's really important, that like, and a roadblock for a lot of veterans, especially maybe that do 10 years and then they need to like get back out into the career, the private sector, and they need to find a job, and maybe they don't have a degree, and it's like, okay, I have all this valuable experience, but it's so hard to like even break through that like first level threshold of like, oh, a degree is required here. But if they maybe just like took a few minutes and actually looked at the person's qualifications and like the things that they've done, that may change their mind about the person's ability to perform the job functions.
Yeah, for sure. Luckily, I think like most technology companies, I would say, aren't requiring a degree anymore, which is awesome. But yeah, I mean, that's something that like is going to go away here pretty soon. I think it has become kind of like this like arbitrary thing that most companies don't care about, and they know that. I mean, most people, if you look at them, like what they're actually doing in the private sector has nothing to do with what degree they have anyway.
So for our listeners, if somebody wanted to kind of get a hold of Shift and utilize them, do you operate across the country? Is it one specific region? How does that
Oh,
work?
it's all over. Like all the programs are all digital, as far as like the career advancement for the transitioning folks. And then yeah, we feature people from all over the country, on the platform. So it's fully distributed across the country.
You touched on something that a lot of the tech companies aren't requiring degrees. What is it that you're seeing, and then how can maybe people like us or listeners or whoever, how can they apply that to maybe become more attractive as like a potential hire, maybe through Shift or not through Shift? Like what are companies, these cutting edge companies, looking for in entry mid-level roles?
Yeah. I think if you're someone that kind of like fits that mold I was talking about earlier, where you're applying for jobs where maybe you necessarily don't have that exact like industry experience or specific skill set that they're looking for, but you have all these, unique experiences and things you did in the military, you have to formulate a story around those experiences to mold what they're looking for, right? I think that's one of the hardest part for veterans to kind of get in their head when they're leaving the military, is that's like your opportunity to really tell the world you are who you want to be based off of your background, right? You can kind of reinvent yourself at that time period. So it's like a lot of research and kind of due diligence on the front end, and then you look at all the stuff you did and you say, okay, how can I formulate my experience in the military to kind of fit what this person is looking for without all those hard skills? And so it's all about, you hear this a lot, like it's all about being able to tell a good story, and get people to empathize with you and to believe that you can come in and kind of do what they're looking for you to do.
What do you think as, and you can give me the salesman answer, I guess, here, and maybe that's why you're an account executive. What's a way that you did that maybe landed you this job with Shift, or a way that you can pitch yourself in a way that that drives that empathy from the person on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, my story is a perfect example of this. Like, I went from being a Navy EOD tech, no prior private sector or technology experience whatsoever. And I set myself up for success to get this position. One, the SkillBridge internship I did was as a BDR rep, so that entry level sales role at a technology company. So I had that on my background, and then for the past 18 months before I got this job at Shift, I was just running and building Stasis full time. And a lot of the partnerships we had were with like healthcare systems, like big hospitals and research centers. So I kind of developed like a resume where I was like, hey, I'm able to kind of take what I'm doing. I can sell that into these hospital systems. I've done the BDR thing, basically, believe in me that I can kind of get up to speed and perform. And obviously, I think like having a relationship with Mike, and he saw what I was doing with Stasis, and you know, me and a couple other guys started a nonprofit foundation for our community a couple of years ago that's doing really good. So I'd like done successful projects outside of the military before, and that definitely played a huge factor. If you talk to Mike, he'll tell you the number one thing that's what he sees from people that are successful going through the transition process and being high performance or not is having side projects. Like, so whatever it is, a podcast, trying to start a clothing company, a bagel shop, like just something outside of your normal 9 to 5 job is like the number one sign of whether someone's going to be successful or not, which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about that, like, haven't quite beat it to death on this podcast, but have talked at length about how you can really build a resume online, like, but not through a traditional resume. It's like
Yeah.
somebody watches, like, reads your newsletter, or like, they listen to your podcast, or you kind of have like this proof of work, um that even if it's not successful, that's not really the point. It's like, hey, I'm so passionate about this one area or whatever, and then people can really see that. And I think that passion is what can translate, not necessarily like, do you have a background in this specific thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like those projects and kind of like landscape of work that you can point to is it's huge for someone that wants to like break in, that fits that background, because you can kind of point to stuff and be like, look what I did over here. I had 10,000 people sign up for my landing page or whatever the thing is.
Mhm.
Well, I think it kind of proves too that if you have a side gig or somebody has, something that they're working on the side, it just proves that they're not comfortable. They're not settling for their 9 to 5 job. They're constantly looking for something to take them to that next level.
Yeah,
You
100%.
you touched on Stasis a little bit, and that's your own personal company. Can you give us kind of the rundown on that?
Yeah. So it's a digital health company. We've kind of found a little niche during the pandemic where we're building rehab programs for COVID patients that have developed. It's called PACS. It's like post-acute COVID syndrome, long haul COVID, if you guys have heard that being thrown around. Really interesting story of how we kind of got there. Originally, the company we were trying to develop like a new smart cold tub, like for athletic recovery. That was something like me and a lot of the dudes that I worked with, we'd gotten super into sauna, cold tub, and like the Wim Hof breathing back in, it was like 2017, 2018. And at our shop, we'd even like converted a chest freezer into like this makeshift cold tub, and we would do it every day and stuff. And so it was like, I really enjoyed it. And a lot of the guys got a lot of stuff out of it. But we were like, dude, this is crazy. We're spending like $30 a day on ice. And, there was no like real easy way to do a cold tub unless you had like a professional, setup that we're talking 10, 15 grand. And so we actually were trying to set it up basically where like kind of the electric scooters where we were going to place cold tubs into like CrossFit gyms throughout the country. And then you could kind of find a cold tub on an app near you, go pay for it, use for it all through the app and stuff. So kind of like a commercial model. And we had some gyms in Virginia Beach that were going to let us do it and stuff. And then the pandemic kicked off and like all the gyms closed down. So we were like, shit, we got to figure out something else to do. So we started getting into like the breathing programs and developing breathing programs to like help people with their cardiovascular or like aerobic endurance. Got hooked up with this doctor from Mount Sinai, which is a pretty prestigious hospital up in New York. And that was like right when COVID was kicking off. And, it's a respiratory disease. So there's a lot of breathing problems involved in it. We started doing a little pilot program with Mount Sinai, and then it's kind of like ballooned over the past year into like us working with like tens of thousands of people from throughout the country and in different countries. So it's been super cool.
What is what's exactly the offering, or I guess how did it evolve from like the cold tub to more breathing focused?
Yeah, so I was at the time, myself and my partner Dan were just really into a lot of the breathing stuff on our own, like personally for a few years there, and just following the kind of trend and where we saw like a lot of the mindfulness and meditation space going. I thought the breathing stuff was going to be kind of the next cool thing in like the health and wellness space with Wim Hof. He was blowing up at the time with his stuff. So that's kind of like we talked about it and we discussed it and we were saying, yes, let's go this way. We first started developing like, we call them stress management programs for a lot of people that were like trying to join some sort of special operations community that were in like debt or, before they go to boot camp. That wasn't super successful. And then that was like kind of when the COVID thing happened. And once we started doing that, it kind of just took off. So we were like, okay, I guess we're going to get into like the healthcare industry. So it's been kind of crazy that, like, how much has changed over the past year, and just like learning so much. Neither one of us had any experience like in the healthcare industry, or kind of working with like doctors and PT clinics and stuff before. So it's been super cool. The offering is like very simple. People typically hear about us because they get like a referral from their doctor, their PT, and then they come onto our website, they get like linked up with a respiratory trainer. They'll do a consultation, kind of see what's going on, like you would expect from a typical doctor. And then we have like specific programs depending on what you're trying to deal with. They get prescribed a program. We have like an app that kind of walks them through their daily training. And then we do like, brief check-ins with them once a month, or it's kind of up to the patient on the frequency of that. So right now we're kind of going through a big product development phase of being able to incorporate like data from wearables and stuff to connect to the app. So we can start to like really personalize and individualize the experience. Yeah.
It's pretty cool
about that stuff. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good, man. I like the fact that you're able to pivot with the market. You were doing the cold tub thing, COVID happened, gym shut down. You're like, okay, let's move away from that. And then you're doing the stress management with depth kids, people in depth, I guess we'll call them. That wasn't super successful. And then COVID popped off and you're like, okay, let's lean into that. Are you guys the ones that are developing the treatment for them, or is that more so like the doctor?
So yeah, we actually like work kind of hand in hand. So we have both a neuroscientist and a pulmonologist that are on our advisory board. But there's been something that people don't, I guess, or really know, is like there's a ton of academic literature and research that's been done on breathing and like its effect on your nervous system, and how it affects emotional state, and your physiology on cardiovascular load and HRV and all this stuff. So we kind of looked at all of the research that were out there and developed an initial framework, and then we've been kind of iterating on it, the past year, to figure out what's working, what's not. I'm super excited about the wearable piece, because that'll give us like real hard biometric data, and we'll be able to see like what time of the day is it most effective for you to do it, all these really cool metrics to take it kind of to the next level. But yeah, we did a study with Mount Sinai, and then actually next month that we have a blind placebo controlled trial starting with UPenn Medical Center for heart failure patients. And that's going to be like a 6-month trial. So it'd be really big deal if that goes well, because we're kind of going down the route of eventually we're trying to get this covered by like insurance and employer healthcare systems too. So like all this, the research is going to go a long way in being able to make that happen, hopefully by the end of the year.
So you said that there's like all this literature and documentation and studies that support like why breathing is or controlled breathing improves all these things. I don't doubt that. Give us like the quick and dirty of like, what is it that it's offering? Like what improvements does it make to stress level, or is it more like leaning into the COVID side? I know that like mindfulness is like a super big deal over the last like couple years, especially with like Calm and like these sleep apps and meditative apps and stuff like that. This seems like something that falls into that same sector.
Yeah.
What are kind of the tangible benefits that somebody would be able to see from going and using one of your plans?
Sure. Yeah. So it kind of there's a ton of like little stuff, like everything from your heart rate, blood pressure, immune system, stuff like that. But like the bigger picture of it is, and it's what applies to no matter if you're a COVID patient, heart failure patient, someone with asthma, whatever it is. breathing really affects it's called your autonomic nervous system, which basically controls everything else in your system. So it's responsible for like all your organs. It controls your heart rate, blood pressure, skin temperature, your immune system, how much sleep you get, literally everything, stress levels. And that's broken down into two different branches. You have like the fight or flight mode, and then rest and digest is typically what a lot of people call the other side of that nervous system. If you breathe really fast and hyperventilate, that activates your fight or flight mode. If you breathe slow and kind of control your breathing, that activates the rest and digest, or it's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So particularly with a lot of the COVID patients, they're stuck in this like chronically activated fight or flight mode. So their respiration rate is much higher. A lot of them are breathing through their mouth, like upper chest dominant breathing, and all that just kind of continues in that fight or flight pattern. So it's basically all geared around trying to slow that down by slowing down their breathing rate. Typically, people are breathing, 14 to 18 breaths per minute. We train them down to get to 6 breaths per minute. And then that also really affects like your HRV, which is basically an indicator of that nervous system and how much stress your body is going through. So the higher you want a higher heart rate variability, that basically means your nervous system is like prepared to take on more strain or stress every day. So those are kind of a few things that we focus on.
That sounds like super scientific, and you sound like you know what you're talking about on all these things. So I'm going to take your word for it.
I've spent a lot of time reading and talking about this over the past couple of years. So
yeah, it sounds like this isn't your first time giving the pitch for it.
Did anybody else just start counting their breaths, or was that
I
just
know,
me?
I was
like, am I
oh,
breathing really fast? Like,
Josh is actually going to lead us through some breathing exercises at the end of the podcast here. So
there you go.
I was curious, like, what is your, like, how has your knowledge of this space and like everything that you guys have seen and done with Stasis, what is like the day-to-day impact? Like, how has your breathing changed because of like what you know about this?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I got into it in the first place, right? Is because I was doing all this stuff on my own and saw a big difference. It's made a huge impact on like my running and my aerobic endurance and kind of just like my fitness for sure since I started paying attention to my breathing. But yeah, it's like something that I'm constantly thinking about for sure throughout the day.
What can you give us like some? We'll be sure to check out Stasis, obviously, but can you give us like a 60-second lesson on how we should be breathing better? Or
yeah, there's like basically 3 pillars that we harp on for functional breathing. One, it's to like, unless you're doing very strenuous like anaerobic exercise, you should be breathing through your nose always, like inhales and exhales through your nose. You'd be surprised at how many people actually breathe through their mouth. Second one is to like use your diaphragm when you're breathing, right? So the bottom of your stomach, right? That's where your diaphragm sits. And to activate that, vice your upper chest. A lot of people breathe like real shallow, rapid breaths, right? And you'll see like your shoulders rise or your upper chest rise. So stay away from that. And then third is that respiration rate, like aiming for that. When you're consciously trying to breathe or doing like a 10-minute session of this, you want to focus on that 6 breaths per minute time frame. So typically we'll recommend a 4-second inhale followed by a 6-second exhale. And then you have a slight natural pause, in between breaths.
I'll have to maybe spend some time on that tonight. I'm already like super self-conscious about it now.
I'm like trying to activate my diaphragm. I'm like, is that my diaphragm? Or like, so you guys are obviously leaning more towards like COVID patients and their recovery and maybe just other like medical situations. But for somebody that wants to use it as like stress management or panic attacks or anxiety, whatever, do you guys offer something like where can they just download an app and sign up with a program? Or
yeah, for sure. They can kind of do more generic stuff, and that's something we're gonna be kind of like figuring out is like what else do we want to do, because a lot of it is the basics of it, the foundation kind of applies to everyone, just being a human. And then there's kind of like little things that we can tweak to kind of hone in on these specific chronic illnesses or diseases. So yeah, it's just like we kind of like, when we look at the market, there's a ton of people doing that, right? Where they're building a brand around being more like a meditation or mindfulness company for general health and wellness. And we saw that and like we want to do the exact opposite, right? And we're like, okay, everything we do is going to be backed by like research and science and legit. Because we just saw like no one was doing that, and there's a gap in the market, I guess, as far as like people actually looking at the research and making the connection that like, hey, this could be a legit like healthcare company. It doesn't have to be like a general wellness, more consumer facing company. So there's strategic initiatives as far as like not offering everything, right now too.
Sure. No, I get that.
It turns out that breathing is a little bit important, and everybody does do it at least once a day. So I would imagine the market for that type of thing is pretty large.
Well, I kind of like laughed to myself when you had said, Josh, you said I got like really into breathing. And in my
Like,
head, I was
so
like,
into breathing.
yeah, like I also am really into breathing. Like
No, but like you think like most people go their whole lives without actually like stopping and just focusing on their breathing for a couple of minutes. Like when's the last time you just kind of stopped there and like just focused on your breathing?
About
you don't.
45 seconds ago when you brought it up, that's when I started focusing on it.
Yeah,
but no, I
found this passion for it.
Yeah, I'm hooked. Should we, Brock, do you have anything else on Stasis?
Well, maybe not particularly on Stasis. I was going to kind of pivot here. Do you have anything?
No, that's I was gonna say. Should we get into the psychedelic retreat?
Yes. Okay. So I have to ask. For those listening, I did some snooping on Josh on his personal page prior to our interview, and you cite on there that you went on a psychedelic retreat, a veterans psychedelic retreat, and met a few people. And also for everybody listening, I'm not doxing Josh. I asked and got the clearance to bring this up on the conversation, so I'm not totally throwing him to the wolves. We got to know about this, like close in.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, it's something I've been into for the past few years now, and it's been kind of life-changing in what it's brought to my life. So the opportunity came up to go on this ayahuasca retreat through Heroic Heart Projects, which is a veteran nonprofit that basically facilitates the retreats for veterans. First time doing ayahuasca, I was down in Mexico, and it was a crazy, very good experience. I've kind of itching to go down there again now. It's been about a year. I'm hoping to go in summer, actually, with a couple other EOD buddies who have recently got out of the Navy. But yeah, I had no problem talking about it. It was actually something that I kind of got out of that retreat, was just to going through the transition and like looking for a job and having a startup. You kind of feel like you have to like act a certain way on social media or whatever it is, because with the environment we live in now, you never know what you're going to say that's going to piss off someone or kind of close an opportunity for you. And so it was something I didn't really, I kind of had like my professional life and then my personal life, but with how much impact this stuff is having on veterans and just the world in general. When coming back from that, I was like, I'm just going to start being myself in all aspects of my life. And if some people get butthurt and don't want to do business with me or work with me or whatever, then those are the people I don't want to be associated with anyway. So fuck them.
That's so cool. I want to hear some more like day-to-day details of like what the retreat consisted of, but I think you're really driving at something that's a huge problem, and like you really you can get canceled very quickly in our day-to-day culture here, and it's such a bummer because it really prevents people from saying and doing the things that they want. But yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you, and I think that you'll naturally, with that type of mindset, you'll naturally gravitate towards other people that think and believe the same way, and everybody else will do the same. So maybe that is a good thing. You see that so much more with just legalization of like marijuana, especially in light of like all of the studies that are being done to like treat PTSD. And I'm curious if there's any kind of like scientific stuff with this and PTSD, but there's a lot of interesting things that are happening with how it psychedelics or marijuana or whatever can serve veterans.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like that is like marijuana and all these psychedelics, I believe are going to be the future of a large like mental health basically in our economy for the mental health system. They're so much more effective than all the like pill SSRIs and all the stuff that they prescribe to people now. So it's cool to kind of see it at this early light, because like in the next 5 to 10 years it's going to be legal everywhere, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool to see how like it impacts the world, because I think it's going to really change a lot of things hopefully for the better.
It's really fascinating for me too, like over the past couple of years, to see something like marijuana go from like growing up, it was so taboo. Like, yeah, the DARE program, and like it just it wasn't, wasn't something you did. Just like I'm sure 99.9% of America, like I smoked weed back when I was in high school, like maybe a handful of times, and I like didn't really like it because I always felt like I was going to get in trouble. And like my dad grew up in the 70s, so big old pothead way back in the day. And it's funny to like see my relationship change with my dad, because now he's like an empty nester, it's just him and my mom, and they're like doing their thing, and he's like started to dabble back in it, and he's like so open with me about it. And I'm like, at first I'm like, man, this is weird, Dad, you're talking to me about getting high, but now it's just like it's just like not a taboo thing anymore, because it's just becoming legal in so many places. I agree with you. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a big change in that. On this psychedelic retreat, what was it? Mushrooms? Like what was the psychedelic?
We did a lot of psychedelics. We did the first ceremony night was mushrooms, and then we did 3 ayahuasca ceremonies. And I also did 2, it's called Bufo. It's the 5-MeO DMT, like out of the toad venom that you smoke. I did that twice as well.
Really, I'm Googling, what was it, Heroic Hearts, or what is this? I'm needing to see
Heroic
like what
Hearts project.
What is the pitching for this? Is it just like, hey, come down to Mexico with some other veterans and just trip nuts for like a week, or what? what is the? I mean, that's obviously not what they say, but what is the? What are they saying is like the benefit of? What you're going to get out of this?
It's for, they like market it for PTSD or trauma, depression, and like mental health basically.
Yeah. What I guess what were your biggest, I mean, you talked about how you want to like come back and be more yourself. What did that seem to be consistent with what other people thought, or what were the other takeaways that you think you'd had?
No, so it's kind of like pretty unique as far as everyone's experiences. I mean, so it's definitely, I want to like make sure people are aware. It's not like go down there, trip balls. Like everything is very intentional and like has purpose behind it. So you do a lot of work with like coaches basically before the retreat to kind of help them, or they help you really, why do you want to go down here? Like, what are you looking to get out of it? What's your intention? What's your purpose? And because like that's a big part of it during the ceremony is you really have you're kind of like communicating with these substances, right? It's not like you just take it and shit just fucking happens. you have to put like a lot of work in. And that was one of the things that I actually took away was like not going into these things with expectations, right? Like that I'm just going to take a substance and it's going to fix all my problems. That was so like the first night we actually did ayahuasca. That's kind of like what happened is I guess I had expectations of like what was going to happen during that ceremony. And I didn't get anything, like nothing happened. I was like, it happened to about 50% of the people where like for whatever reason or not, like the first night, I guess it's kind of common for people to have like not a bad trip, but just like you don't get much out of it, or you feel like, you just nothing happened. There was no communication at all.
Right.
And like that also happened the first time I did 5-MeO DMT, and kind of like looking back at it now, I was in the same situation where like I was like so excited to go down here and do this. So I knew what I was kind of getting myself into. And I put all these crazy expectations, I guess, around these things. And when it didn't happen, I had to kind of like look back and be like, okay, what's going on here? And then like the third night, which was the second ayahuasca ceremony, I kind of like sat like everyone's got their own little mat space in the ceremony room, and I like drank my cup of ayahuasca, and then I just like repeated in my head like over and over again like what my intentions were and what I wanted to get out of it, and kind of like talking to ayahuasca, like begging. Ayahuasca has like a motherly figure, so like begging her to like come to me and talk to me and all this stuff, and like I felt like I really put in the work, and she came. She came that night, so it was pretty crazy. And then like the other couple ceremonies were just like awesome after that, because I didn't go into them with expectations. I kind of knew like here's real broad overview of like what I'm hoping to get out of it, and then sit there and wait and kind of do the work, And so it was pretty cool. Really learned a lot about how I was like bullshitting myself, again, portraying this like image to the world of who I wanted people to think I was, and not really being that person behind closed doors. So it was a really cool experience for me.
Do you think that you've seen an improvement over the past year since then? On
Uh,
like,
100,
yeah,
100%. Yeah, you can like talk to people that know me, and I'm like I think a much different person for sure. And I've done, like I said, I'd done psychedelics before that, but never ayahuasca, never in that setting where like we had legit shamans running the ceremonies that like they fly in from the Amazonian in Peru. That ayahuasca is like that's where it started. So it was super cool to have that like very tribal, like authentic experience with them. And even the mushroom trip, which I have like a lot of experience with mushrooms, was completely different than anything I'd ever experienced before, just because of having the shamans and all the music that they have. And you're also in a room with like 15 other people tripping balls on mushrooms. So there's like this like weird like group dynamic that you kind of like, a lot of people, there's like telepathic shit going on, like the group kind of goes in and out of these like waves, and it was a really cool experience, that I think everyone should definitely check out if they're interested in exploring that avenue of consciousness.
2022 wish list just got updated. No, that is really cool though, and especially knowing and feeling the tangible benefits from that, and kind of being able to be an advocate for that now. I think that it's very easy to talk about and advocate for something that when you yourself have like experienced a life change. So I think that that's really cool. You talked about something there that I'd like to see if you could kind of expand on a little bit, is going down there and like preparing yourself for whatever it was that was coming. Maybe mushrooms and this type of retreat aren't for everybody, and probably not for most people. What was that preparation like? Because I think that when you're about to go under or looking to make a major life change, there isn't just something that just happens and then you're fixed.
Yeah.
You really do have to put in the work, like you said. what were the kinds of things that you were doing and thinking about going in to prepare yourself to make that kind of life change?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's something that a lot of people you find out when you get down there is like a lot of us. This happened kind of out of the blue, like the chance to go down there on this retreat. And it seemed to kind of be at the perfect moment for like a lot of us that were out there. Like a lot of people were just in these really rough spots in their life. And so I felt like called down there. Like I had put so like how it all went down is I had known about this organization, Heroic Hearts Project, for a while since I got out, basically. And I think like the day I got out, I put in an application to go down there, and I actually didn't end up going until almost 2 years later. So it was kind of weird. Like I developed a relationship, a working relationship with one of the girls who's a neuroscience that works for them, like helps. She volunteers some time for like some of the studies they're doing. And I was recently, I think she was on, I was talking to her on a podcast, and I was just like, kind of like thought came on mind, like, hey, I saw you're working with Heroic Heart Project, put in an application a long time ago, like would love to go down there. And like a week later in my inbox was like an invitation for this next retreat that left in like 3 weeks. And I was like at a rough time in my life where I'd moved down here from Virginia Beach, was doing Stasis, but like not making money to pay myself. So I was living off like a little disability money from the VA. They just like, and didn't know what was next for me, right? Like my transition wasn't like peaches and roses where I had this cush job waiting for me when I got out. Like I worked on Stasis full time for like 18 months before I did that. So it was cool. Like when I got down there, I'd been thinking a lot about ayahuasca when I got the invitation. And then like I said, I did a lot of work with like the coaches, and I was just journaling, meditating a lot, like trying to figure out like what's the next chapter of my life. And like I thought going down there was kind of like this really good refresh, kind of like restart, where that's how a lot of people like use these big psychedelic trips, is because like how it actually works in your brain is it kind of like all these like bad thoughts or thought processes that you have that become ingrained in you, it kind of like wipes it all clean, so you kind of get this like new perspective that you haven't seen before. So from like a timing perspective and stuff, it just all worked out. And like since I've gotten back from that, I can like point to very tangible things of like how my life has gotten much better. So that's cool for sure.
It's really cool. That sounds like a lot of, I mean, I say fun, but like there's obviously much more to it than that. But that's a
Yeah,
cool
it's
story.
it's not all like fun. Like it's a lot of hard work, right? Like most people don't want to go do that stuff where it's gonna like bad stuff is going to come up, or stuff that you're going down there to kind of like work on whatever problems you have in life. So it's not like you're going down there and it's rainbows and unicorns the whole time. But it was a very good experience. And like I said, everyone that was down there in my group like all came back transformed for sure. I don't know, again, that stuff doesn't last forever unless you like implement the stuff you learned when you get back into real life. That's like probably the most important thing that they harp on is these retreats, is like reintegration into society afterwards, right? You come back like all woke and think you know the answers to everything, and it's like you gotta kind of sometimes gotta pump the brakes and start to think through things a little deeper than just these crazy insights you have on tripping balls.
Yeah, I will definitely be eager to maybe reach out to some more people that have gone, and I'd love to hear some other experiences. So maybe we can kind of connect over that. Was the gal, the neuroscientist, was she also in the military or former?
I don't believe she was. Maybe yes, she was. Her name's Doc Kate Pate.
Okay.
If anyone wants to look her up, I believe she was in the Air Force, if I want to say, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'll double check on that.
Okay.
But yeah, her specialty is kind of like in PTSD and TBIs and stuff.
Yeah. Did you have anything else on that, Tim?
No, that answers all my questions. It sounds like it was a cool experience, man. Having you kind of explain like the hard work and stuff that goes into it, not what I thought it was going to be about, but it's interesting. It sounds like you benefited from it. It sounds like a cool thing for sure. Probably not for everybody, like you said, but no, that's cool, man.
Let's start to close out here a little bit, but I am curious to hear about your time working like as like an entrepreneur. We increasingly and are like talking to more and more veteran entrepreneurs and them entering this space. And I am personally kind of fascinated with the whole dynamic of people, starting their own companies. And I honestly think that veterans are super uniquely equipped. You touched on this with Shift. Like we have all these skills and time leading, and maybe not like the background to like work at a traditional job. I personally think that entrepreneurship is a very attractive route for people with our background. Can you talk about that journey for you, what you've learned, maybe advice that you'd give to somebody that was looking to do the same thing?
Yeah, I've learned a ton. I mean, I've learned everything. Like I didn't know anything about business right before, and most people don't. The hardest part about it is like you can read as much as you want online and books and stuff, and that's all great. But like, it's just so independent. Everyone's path is completely different than someone else, right? Unless they're doing the exact same thing you are. So like you just have to go out and do it really to learn, and you're going to make a ton of mistakes along the way, and that's how you learn. And most people fail in business because at some point they quit, right? Like that's why companies don't survive typically, is they either you run out of money, or you just like aren't growing fast enough or whatever and decide to quit doing the business. So it's like just having resilience and being okay with like testing stuff and failing is kind of what it takes, I think, to start something successful nowadays.
Well, and it sounds like you have had some major, I guess, I don't want to call them failures, but like major pivots and changes to your business with Stasis, and like not letting a setback that's not the game changer or like set you back into like a normal job, I guess. I mean, you do have a job, but working on this on the side.
Yeah, there's been definitely times where I've like wanted to quit and I was done with it. And like, luckily I have an awesome partner in my buddy Dan, because every time he kind of like talks me, sets me straight on what we're doing and stuff. So yeah, it's been. I mean, you could talk to anyone, and like there's roller coasters for sure. But like I said, I guess just the ability to keep going will hopefully be the driver of success for us at some point.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it, and it sounds like you guys are making a really tangible impact in a good way. Josh, do you want to give everybody listening a place where people can go to find out more about you, more about Stasis, Shift?
Yeah,
Plug
sure.
anything you want.
All my personal social media is just at Josh Duntz, DUNTZ. Shift is shift.org. And then Stasis is Stasis.life. And then like we're at Stasis or at Shift for social media, and people can find all the resources and stuff there.
This has been good conversation, Josh. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate. Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.